A very good morning to all of you. On behalf of WRI-India's Energy Program, I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished speakers, panelists, and participants online and those present here. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here today for the workshop on demand-centric pathways to 450 plus gigawatt by 2030, role of DISCOMS in supporting the CNI customers to enhance renewable energy demand. Before we begin, I'm going to announce a few housekeeping rules. I request you to kindly keep your phones on silent. This event will be live streamed on YouTube. There are tea and snacks arranged for all the guests at the back of the room. Please help yourself. We have kept copies of the report at the registration desk. You can also scan the QR code for accessing the report. Thank you. Commercial and industrial CNI consumers in India account for close to 50% of the country's electricity consumption. The sector is also the primary source of revenue for the electricity utilities, distribution companies in India because of the tariff structure, where CNI consumers cross-subsidize agricultural and residential consumers. The CNI customers are also centric to enhancing the demand for renewable energy in the country. In this workshop, together with our speakers and panelists, WRI India endeavors to understand the challenges and concerns for CNI consumers and identify the opportunities that may exist for enhancing the demand for RE in the CNI segment. With this, we will now begin our event. I would like to invite Mr. Tirthankar Mandal, Head of Energy Policy, WRI India, to deliver the opening remarks and set the context for the day.
So as we look forward to this current situation of the country, we have already seen that there has been high targets has been set for the RE. So recently, not only RE, it's now has been termed as non-fossil fuel, so as to include other forms of RE plus non-RE kinds of thing. But for the purpose of this presentation, I would like to set the context for the RE only, and we would actually contextualize in the context of 450 plus, because the reason is that not everyone is clear how much of that the announcement that was made in Paris in the last COP26, that 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel energy is going to come by 2030. Not everyone is clear how much of that 500 gigawatt is going to constitute as RE. So we have actually put it as, that is the reason why we call it as 450 plus. So that plus constitutes something, but that something is not well defined at the moment. So in that context, we also see that the commercial and industrial players are a major constituent, both from the consumption side as well as the generation side as well. And at the same time, DISCOM are also a major player, because they are the ones who are actually at one level aggregating all these generation of the RE and also distributing it, and also providing it meaning at what price this RE gets to the end users. That is where they are actually that is why they are the main players, right? So it's not just that it's not just the provisioning of RE comes into play, because the DISCOMs also play a very vital role as part of the usual social contract that we say, that it comes from the welfare part of this. We got into as part of the social welfare economics kind of understanding, that DISCOM has a social role to play. For example, like usually the cross subsidization understanding actually comes from that role. And as a result, lot of this discussion and lot of these upcoming quote unquote that reforms context actually comes into play as when we go on talking about this low cost and all of these issues that are coming up. So without getting into that, so when we talk about this context, we have to keep in mind that these are the larger part of this discussion and larger part of those, I would say, this larger part of the issues that lie out there. It's not just the RE generation and everything out there, but these are the larger issues that are there in the DISCOM side of the story, as well as the generation of the RE, as far as the generation of the RE is concerned. Now, this actually, the left-hand side actually presents you this is taken from, collated from the MNRE and CEA data. It shows us an interesting story. So nothing much to elaborate upon, but it shows us an interesting story that these black verticals are actually the thermal generations, right? So till about 2015 or 2016, I would say, those are the higher kind of generation or higher kind of capacities that are there. But it was after that, from 2017 onwards, the curve tend to be more and more capacity additions are actually happening in the RE side, and more are on the wind and solar kind of RE generations that are happening. So there has been a marked shift in that, and thanks to the political will and the targets that has been set forward for the country for 2022 and afterwards, that has been happening. And at the same time, on the right hand side, that is an interesting story which has been happening for the bidding part of it. This is particularly for the solar, because the solar has been the drastic downward shift has happened for the solar, not so much for the wind, but the solar was the major contributor to this drastic fall of the price and the bidding price is now almost less than 2 rupees. It is like less, sometimes it is actually less than, it's hovering around 244, 230, some that range. But we will get into that discussion. If we get into that discussion, there are various reasons to it, but primary reason is that for whatever reason it is less than around 2 rupees, and that is one of the reason why we call it as solar is cheaper than solar is cheaper than coal, and all of those discussions come into play. But the fact of the matter is that solar is nowadays cheaper than other forms of fossil fuels and other at least at the bidding context. But what is as I earlier was saying, that CNI plays a commercial and industrial players plays a major role in terms of generation at the 2021 level. This is the September 2021 generation level. They are almost generating at 17 gigawatts. The major sources, that is open access solar, rooftop solar, and open access wind, they are almost at 17 gigawatts. They are consuming around more than close to 50% of the total consumption that they are consuming. So they are both like 17 gigawatts, and if you compare it with the total capacity that they already had, like at the August level, August is when India crossed like 100 gigawatts of installed capacity. So out of that 100 gigawatts, it was already 17 gigawatts was actually coming from the commercial and industrial consumers. So we can imagine that how big a role that this particular segment is actually playing. And much to say about. If you go by segment, it is the rooftop solar segment where we see that this is the largest segment, but it is also at the same time we can see that the rooftop solar segment is also one of the segment where we have a higher target. We have a 40 gigawatt target, but at the same time rooftop segment has also not taken off that much, whereas the other segments have actually taken quite a bit of this one. So in the context of this 500 gigawatt or 450 plus gigawatt that we are talking about, CNI segment will be the key to this, will be a key player, both in terms of consumption and other sources, as well as in the form of generation as well. Now, if we talk about how actually CNI segment is actually buying, or when they are consuming it, how they are performing. So the first two bars are actually when they are generating or when they are actually consuming their own things. This bar actually shows they are across these 5 major states. They are actually around 5 to 6 rupees or below that, between 5 to 7 rupees of generation. But when they are sourcing out from grid, with all those costs in the grid, they are actually beyond that range. So it is like the HT commercial and HT industrial and all of those various, this is an average calculation. And for the Tamil Nadu specifically, we qualify it by saying that for Tamil Nadu it is the 2019, because after that there are no tariff orders, latest tariff orders available, but the other states we have the latest tariff orders. But for these for all practical purpose, the crux of the story is that it is quite higher kind of range that the CNI customers are buying from the grid. And incidentally, if we go by the breakup of the how the CNI customers are sourcing, most of their sourcing is from the grid actually, but very little is actually coming from their own sources, as well as group captive and other forms of energy. So the thing is that they are actually spending a lot of per unit cost is quite high than their own generation cost, and this actually is a threat to the grid through the DISCOMS, because there is a potential for shift from the grid to the own source, but that I will come at a later stage why this is also shift. But there are other challenges as well, because part of the reason why they are buying it at a higher cost is that the CNI customers have been asked to kind of cross subsidy surcharges and other forms of charges. The top left corner actually portrays what are the kinds of cross subsidy tariff that are available in these 5 states that we have shown in the earlier graph, and then the lower bottom corner actually talks about the open access surcharges that are available in the as per the latest figures that are available. But this is not all actually. This is the CNI side of the story. But when we talk to the DISCOMs, they also have their own side of the story, and this is pretty interesting to understand from the DISCOM side of the story as well, because this is not always black and white. There is a gray. This is a gray area as well, because as we all know that primarily solar is not a kind of 24/7 source of energy. It's all because part of it is related to the intermittency of it, because when we inject more and more solar into it, the real reason is that there is a DSM penalty associated with it. One of the issue is that the more solar you put in, there is deviation settlement penalties that fall into it, and who is going to pay for those deviation settlement penalties? That is one issue. The other issue is that DISCOM has to plan for the planning of this one, because the generators or the consumers, CNI consumers, doesn't plan for a 24/7 kind of thing, because if they have to plan for 24/7, then they have to otherwise go for storage or another kind of system which doesn't make them a economically feasible at the moment. But they have to arrange, they actually also don't plan for day ahead, or certain kind, how much they are going to consume. So in any case, the DISCOM has to plan for 24/7 into 365 days for the total consumption that the CNI customers are going to get it from the grid. Now, this is a challenge that the DISCOM has to face, even if they are producing solar for their own consumption. Now, there is a cost associated with this planning, and who is going to plan for it? There is a backup for if the solar doesn't get produced, the CNI customer can log into the grid and draw it from the grid. So that backup cost, if the sun is shining bright and fine, then the CNI customer is not drawing it from the grid. So there is some cost associated with this planning, and all of this uncertainty associated with this planning. So there is certain cost which the DISCOM has to bear, and this cost cannot be passed over immediately, but the DISCOM has to resolve this cost. So who is going to pay for it? Now, another issue that the DISCOM also has to bear is that there is the DISCOM now is facing the solar PPAs, as I shown in the earlier graph, is that these solar PPAs are falling. At the same time, there are other forms of this fall of these falling PPAs, which are of late are recent year phenomenon, but the DISCOM has already gone into PPAs which are already high cost PPAs. Now, when the DISCOM is actually provisioning power, it is pulling those PPAs and giving out a average price for that power. So somehow these people, when we talk about low cost solar or low cost RE, these things doesn't fall in the economics, or these things doesn't fall into the consideration. These things actually get into the DISCOM story, and thereby certain other economics or certain other considerations play in DISCOM's consideration. So we have to understand, while we talk about what are the options before DISCOM and what are the evolving story around DISCOMs in the context of this 500 or 450 gigawatt plus. So what are the kind of challenges, or what are the issues that as we go forward? So one of the thing is that the rate of addition. So currently we are adding around 10 to 11 gigawatt per year of RE capacity addition. So if we are to add 450 gigawatt plus, the ramp rate is around 30 to 35 gigawatt per year. So how are we going to add it? Plus the issues that I have just alluded to in the earlier slide from the DISCOM. Oh, what happened? Plus the issues that I have just talked about. And then the considerations that we need to probably this meeting would actually talk about or consider about is that how are these consumers willing to take that into account and talk about all of these issues. Then there is the whole lot of plethora of mechanisms regarding markets, regarding various rules that are coming out, green energy and green open access mechanisms that are just now or in the last stage of getting passed, and all of those things are coming up. And the DISCOMs although they have to evolve in this emerging context. So how they are also going to evolve in this overall target and in this new set of policies that are going to. And we have in our presence the representation from regulators, generators, and also developers. So how all of them actually come together in this new context in this overarching target as well as this emerging context. So I think here I will end this opening presentation over here, and will ask my colleague Vandita to take on from here for the other one. Yeah.
Thank you, Tirthankar, for your remarks. That was helpful primer on setting the context for today's workshop. I would now invite my colleague, Dr. Vandita Sahai, Senior Research Specialist, WRI-India, to join Mr. Tirthankar and present their work on the clean energy transitions in DISCOMS.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome for the discussion on how the role of DISCOMS in supporting CNI consumers to enhance their RE demand, and discussion on this topic. So according to the Ministry of Power, in January 22, India's installed energy capacity was at 152 gigawatt, representing 38.5% of the overall installed power capacity. Solar power installed capacity increased by more than 18 times between 2014 to 2021, from 3 gigawatts to 49 gigawatt. With increase in the RE capacity, the Indian commercial and industrial customers have been adopting more renewable energy due to their falling prices. The growth of the solar rooftop capacity has been led by the CNI segment mostly, which accounts for more than 75% of the rooftop market share. Coming to the DISCOMS and CNI consumer dilemma that we face, with the falling RE prices, it was observed that the CNI customers were finding opportunities to migrate out of the DISCOM supply. However, given the intermittent nature of the RE power, the CNI consumers were unable to completely move out of the DISCOM supply network. This creates uncertainty in the electricity demand management for the DISCOMs, and since the CNI consumers' operations aren't necessarily revealed. So this migration problem creates two problems for the DISCOMs. Firstly, they lose their high-paying customers from the distribution network. And secondly, they face with high uncertainties in their energy demand management, and they have to plan for their 24/7 reliable strategies. DISCOMs are also unable to benefit from the RE falling prices because they are contractually bound by their vintage high-cost fossil fuel power purchase agreements. Given these dynamics, the DISCOMs are actively using the measures allowed in the Electricity Act to increase the weaning and the banking charges for RE power and the imposition of open access surcharges to dissuade the CNI consumers migrating towards their own RE generation. These issues call for new thinking in the RE procurement routes among the CNI consumers, a mechanism which needs to be developed that will be beneficial for both the DISCOMs and the CNI consumers, one that will retain the CNI consumers within the DISCOM network and also enable the CNI customers to meet their energy demand while they're transitioning towards RE. As of right now, the CNI migration to RE-based projects are cost to the consumers and the revenue lost to the DISCOMs. In this paper, we'd like to discuss the following objectives on how the DISCOMs can retain their high-paying customers through innovative mechanisms like the Green Tariff. The objective here is to understand the challenges which the CNI consumers face in the RE procurement routes and also understand the awareness and perceptions surrounding the Green Tariffs among the CNI consumers. So what are Green Tariffs? Green Tariffs are basically contracts in which the CNI consumers typically enter a long-term contract to purchase renewable electricity by the DISCOM. Now, GT or Green Tariff has gained popularity on many accounts. Firstly, their ability to source 100% renewable energy requirement from RE. Second, the savings on their upfront capital investments on RE. Thirdly, they provide price predictability for the CNI consumers as they get into long-term contracts with the DISCOMs. And fourthly, enable the DISCOMs from preventing the CNI migration. Now, GTs in the world, globally, are offered in many formats. However, we have classified them into three types. Firstly, where the consumers directly engage with the producers of RE for tariffs. Under this, the DISCOM has no role to play apart from facilitating the access to transmission and other networks for the consumers for which the charges are levied. Second, in which the DISCOMS procure and provide RE-based electricity supply to the consumers, and the GT is collected as a premium for the services provided. And third is a market-based mechanism where the tariff is linked to the market price of RE. Of the three models, the premium model is the most adopted one worldwide, where the premium-based model is charged. Now, green tariffs in India are being introduced in three states: Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Maharashtra. In Karnataka, the green tariff premium is set on an existing commercial tariff. In Andhra Pradesh, the tariff is a higher demand charge with no fixed charges. And in Maharashtra, the GTs are levied in short-term formats and open to residential consumers as well. In all the states, it is entirely voluntary for the consumers to opt for green tariffs. In both Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, the uptake for green tariff has currently been low. In this paper, this data was collected from RE adopters and non-adopters from 101 corporates and 185 CNI customers. SMI CNI customers, sorry. And the CNI consumers, in the RE adopters were the ones which have either on-site RE capacities or have contracted off-site open access arrangements. The maximum number of respondents for the survey were from the manufacturing sector, followed by the IT sector. Now, looking at the RE procurement in large corporate and SME sectors, we found 5 motivators and 7 barriers for adoption of RE procurement. I'll start with the motivators first, the first one being economic and financial factors. In the survey, we found that as many as 42 corporates and 85% the SME RE users found RE solutions to deliver cheaper power supply, shorter investment paybacks, and offered attractive return on investment. The CAPEX model, where the investor invests his own capital, is the most preferred mode for RE adoption among the corporates. As many as 72% of the corporate adopters suggested that the capital was accessible and had organizational support for adopting CAPEX route over third-party models. Over 18% of the SME non-adopters also reported bank loans to be the preferred route for rooftop financing, as the loan can be paid off in short time. The second factor, which is the organizational one, the survey found that the 47% of adopters had dedicated RE commitments, where 10 were mandated by their business partners to source RE from RE sources. Overall, 60% of the adopters had future expansion plans by exploring new ways to procure RE. 31% of the SME adopters were mainly investing to understand the complete ecosystem and benefits of green tariffs surrounding RE. These investments will help them get more information on the economics of RE and also get first-hand knowledge on information asymmetry. The third factor, which is operational, the survey found that the corporates and the RESCO model providers provided minimum operational commitments and maximum technical expertise. However, the CAPEX mode of investing still dominated for the corporate RE strategy management. For SMEs, the system maintenance under contract with developers was a major plus point, as it eased out their operational worries. The technological factor found that the RE plus storage model offered self-sufficiency, but the evidence for this model were limited in both the corporate and the SME adopter segment. And lastly, for the social motivator, in the survey, 33% of the corporates and 35% of the SME respondents acknowledged that they have adopted RE after their peers have done so. So the SMEs basically relied on personal network and word of mouth from adopters for developer selection. Coming to the barriers, the first one being the regulatory and bureaucratic hurdle, there was a perception among the respondents that open access is only for large consumers due to the current minimum capacity requirement of 1 megawatt. The recent draft regulation by Ministry of Power suggests bringing down the minimum sanction load to 100 kilowatt. This might spur demand for the open access in the SME segments. 25% of the corporates in the survey suggested that their expansion plans were impacted by frequent changes in the RE regulation, as they may make the policies economically non-viable, and there was delay in acquiring metering approval arrangements, as they were the major issues faced by the consumers. The second one being a technological concern, there were 3 main concerns which were observed for this barrier. Firstly, the technical performance of wind projects and generation uncertainties rendered an overall bad perception for the open access wind projects. Secondly, the grid unavailability on on-grid projects make it vulnerable and result in revenue loss. And thirdly, in case of rooftop solar installation, there was lower generation due to panel degradation, which raised concern for the consumers on generation commitments by the developer during the time of installation. The third barrier was organizational influences. The survey found that both corporate and SME consumers raised concern about the loss of aesthetic value due to the rooftop solar panel installations. This indicated a space loss aversion, which was observed in many developed economies as well. The fourth factor being the operational consideration, it was found that the roof space availability and ownership of rooftop was a major bottleneck for rooftop solar adoption among both the corporates and the SME sectors. These rented spaces are often old structure and are too weak to handle the rooftop solar system installation. Close to 15 to 20% of the non-adopters reported this as an important operational issue for adoption. Fifth factor being the economic and financial aspect, there were high capital cost investment was the main concern for 27% of the SMEs and 35% of the corporate non-adopters. The CME respondents argued that there was need for innovative financing as they find the assistance from government and lending process from commercial banks insufficient to enhance the adoption of RE. The second last factor was the social barrier. We found that the peer-to-peer network was very important in uptake of RE among consumers. In the survey, there was lack of such networks, which was evident among 18% of the corporate non-adopters, and 50% of the non-adopters were never approached by the developer, which suggests a very weak existence of peer networks among the CNI consumers. And lastly, the consumer information challenge. The survey suggested that there is large general lack of awareness among consumers. 59% of the corporate non-adopters suggested there was no effort or less effort on the RE information with respect to system costs, benefit adoption, models, and system operations to take informed decisions on RE adoption. Coming to the awareness, perception, acceptability around GT, the survey found that the awareness among green tariff was strikingly low, with up to 82% of the corporate consumers and up to 94% of the SME organizations unaware of GT as a concept and desirous of proof of concept before committing. The perceptions were predominantly negative, with concerns around GT premium longevity. Around 60 to 80% of the total CNI respondents found green tariffs in its current form uneconomical, and a significant proportion would prefer to undertake direct investments in renewable assets. Between 11 to 26% of the CNI consumers in both the segments found GT acceptable. However, they were unable to quantify their willingness to pay for it. The survey also found that 29% of the respondents suggested that DISCOMS should provide clarity on policies on RE adoption to the end users. Coming to the best practices, now DISCOMS must take a few steps to make green tariffs more attractive to consumers in terms of awareness campaigns, better design around it to make it more attractive to consumers. In such measures, we would like to make a few recommendations. Firstly, requiring innovative financing mechanism for SME sector. The major barrier faced by this sector was the lack of affordable financing and the lack of credit worthiness due to the pandemic, which affected their business uncertainties for this sector to make RE investments. The reason for these banks asking these proofs was to establish the repayment ability of the CME customers. One way to establish their credit worthiness would be to ask their previous year's tax filings and other revenue record of their businesses, which will help in turn establish their ability to pay back the loan they have made. The current SBI World Bank Suprabha program and other such innovative financing instruments can provide an effective tool to boost the RE adoption in the SME sector. This is a sector which promises to be one of the biggest RE adopters for the future. The second measure can be the exploring virtual PPAs. A key challenge faced by 10% of the large corporate adopters in the survey was that they were unable to meet the 100% of their energy demand through RE, even if the organization was keen on doing so. To meet such unmet RE demands, financial or virtual PPAs, which are now possible, can be explored. They provide electricity price certainty, and this would also help organizations to transition in meeting the 100% of their energy demand. Under virtual net metering system, the consumers can be based away from the point of generation and yet claim the benefits of RE. Thirdly, increase green tariff awareness. We found in the paper that green tariffs suffer from very low awareness, especially among the SME sector. Interestingly, there are ones which have shown the greatest interest to adopt RE, as there is no capex investment involved during the initial period of its adoption. To address this awareness challenge, DISCOMS can undertake information dissemination activities on GT adoption in GT options in promoting green consumption. Thirdly, increasing the GT attractiveness. One of the main bottlenecks for green tariff within the CNI consumers were the pay and with the premium charges over and above the existing tariff. To avoid such a situation, the paper proposed a green tariff demand aggregator model. Under this model, the consumer's energy demand is aggregated by the utility. The utility locks in the high-paying customers to its service area and provide the RE. The CNI consumers get RE without any capital investments, and the utility can minimize its T&D losses. In the end, I would like to conclude by saying that the main thrust should be to create an enabling environment for the RE procurement and adoption while we transition towards meeting the 500 gigawatt target for RE by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Vandita, for your presentation. It has laid the ground for further discussions on the topic. To take this discussion further, I invite Mr. Bharat Jairaj, Director of Energy Program, WRI-India, to introduce our distinguished keynote speakers.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. It's my privilege to invite Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad to deliver the keynote address. Of course, to those of us working in this sector, he needs no introduction, but let me just say a few words. Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad is a 1989 batch CPES officer, currently serving as Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Power, Government of India. And during his tenure as JS, we've seen many important things happen and happening. Importantly, the Electricity Rights of Consumers Rules of 2021, and more conversations ongoing right now on green power and green open access draft rules. Hopefully those will be finalized soon. At the Ministry of Power, he is in charge of the tariff policy, electricity policy, and issues related to the Regulatory Commission, CERC and JERC. And also, I think a few months ago, he was appointed as the Government Nominee Director to the Power Grid Corporation of India. So a person with all the right experience and expertise to provide the keynote address this morning. Mr. Prasad.
Very, very warm good morning to everyone. And let me first thank WRI for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to be here and listen to you all. I know we are transiting from old generation to a new generation, I call it. In power sector also, we have termed it as transition from fossil to non-fossil. And this is a buzzword which is across the world, not only in India. And we are not far behind, and we are following the same path of transition going forward. Would you like to close it? So, since we are on the path of transition, and all of us are aware that that's the only way we need to proceed further, going from where we are at present in the power sector. Whether it was COP21 at Paris, or it is COP26, which recently got concluded in Glasgow. At both the instances, India made its commitment. And particularly, let me tell you that whatever commitment that we made at Paris in COP21, that is achieving around 40% of installed capacity coming from non-fossil fuel, we have already achieved that. I think in the presentation, the figure was a bit outdated, I'll say. It was given for January 22. If you go as on date, we have already crossed 40% instead of 38%, which was getting reflected there. And that 40% we crossed in November 2021 itself. So the moment we are transiting from one concept to the other, a lot of changes are witnessed in the system. Each and every stakeholder into the system needs to be aligned. And I think it was rightly pointed out in the opening address, which I could hear to some extent by Mr. Trithankar Mandal. He gave the perspective from the consumers as well as from the DISCOMS perspective, which is a pain point definitely, because they also need to transit from the existing mindset to a futuristic mindset, which we'll be adopting going forward. And that too, I'll say, is that we are entering into the zone of uncertainty to some extent, trying to take more risk, which means that we'll be moving from a comfort zone to a discomfort zone. And naturally, nobody would like to enter into a discomfort zone at the very first go. And that is how the pain points of the DISCOMS, which every time gets reflected and becomes a non-enabler as far as the promotion of RE is concerned. But of late, what we have found is, and the moment we took this journey in ministry as well as along with our co-ministry, that is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, both of us have been working together to take it forward. What we found is we don't need to take them as a discomfort level. We need to take them as a partners. And if we take them as partners, then we need to understand them. We need to address their issues. And going forward, the moment we try to see that they can supplement our effort in that direction. So now how it has started happening is, I'll not only restrict myself to power sector, because power sector is largely now dependent on the other sector as well, whether it is coal, wherein all our power plants, thermal power plants are dependent on that, or going to Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, wherein we are dependent on liquid fuels and the gas. Further from here, going towards other ministries like environment, which is also concerned about the carbon capture, etc. So that means it's going to be a joint effort of all stakeholders in the policy making, starting from the driver, that is Ministry of Environment. And we have to talk holistically from the perspective of energy and not only restrict ourselves to electricity. Just to give you a figure, we contribute in the entire kitty of energy only 18% as of date. So what we are talking and what we have been concentrating so far in India is mostly on the electricity side, which we have been meeting quite easily, the targets. But the moment I go towards the carbon capture and others, which is the ultimate goal as far as the environment is concerned, we have to look the larger pie, which is around 82%, coming from the different segments of the industry and the energy business. So how do we go there? Either one immediate thought comes is, okay, since electricity sector has been doing quite good, can we not increase the share of electricity sector itself and try to capture the larger pie? Yes, that's true, and that is how we have set our targets slightly higher now, and maybe by 2030 we need to increase this 18% share to somewhere around 25%. In the 2047 document, which is still under discussion, we may increase from 25% to further up. The idea is that we need to move towards a cleaner fuel so that we are able to capture the carbon. Now, coming towards the fuel that will be used for the electricity, so we need to reduce the fossil fuel. And in fossil fuel, as far as India is concerned, we have only one kitty, that is coal, which right now constitutes around anywhere between 70 to 75% of the energy in the entire kitty of electricity. Even though the installed capacity is a bit less, but if you see in terms of energy that is being supplied, it's still quite substantial. We thought of gas, which is a bit cleaner than coal, but not clean enough to be called as renewables. But that kitty, unfortunately for India, is not available, and we are falling short of availability of gas, and hence that's no option as far as India is concerned. So what is left out? So left out is solar, wind, and other forms of renewables, what we are talking going forward. Could be in terms of hydrogen, could be in terms of any other new technology that comes on our way. So one is from the perspective of changing the profile of the generation itself, that is the profile of the sources itself, wherein we move towards the cleaner side of it. The second is the topic today, which is that is how do we leverage it towards making it affordable to CNI customers. Because we are aware about it, and as far as policy level is concerned, I think you rightly pointed out that we have started initially with right to consumers, wherein we introduced something which enabled the consumer moving from only a consumer towards prosumer concept, and then going towards facilitating it through some means. But that's not the end of the entire story. That concept of the prosumer is to be taken forward to a minor detail, which has to be done by the concerned state commissions. But of late, it always comes to our forum is that the openness, which is not happening as on date, maybe because of the various reasons. Some of the regions were also told today in the morning, I could see that they don't want to, there are barriers which have been put into the way either in terms of the subsidies or the surcharges or additional surcharges, or in terms of standby charges, or a number of charges which gets levied to the openness consumers, and they are not able to transit from the DISCOMS to the other side of it, as it becomes unviable. So what is the way out? So what we thought in ministry is, can we have something different treatment, some preferential treatment, some kind of a facilitation in terms, at least for those consumers who would like to go green. And in that endeavor, we had taken out that rule of green open access, which is almost final. I think you rightly mentioned that it's almost final. And we have a final round of presentation, which is scheduled on 30th. So most likely, I think we should be in a position to take it there. But besides these enablers, I think we have been always clarifying to the stakeholders that this is the way forward through which we have to go. And in our discussion with all the state regulators in the forum of regulators meetings, which is mostly now chaired by Honorable Minister himself, giving importance to this particular segment of RE. And that is how the three states who came forward, and that was, I think, if I'm not wrong, Maharashtra was the first one, and then Karnataka and Andhra who came forward to at least introduce the green tariff when we were drafting the policy in our ministry. So in fact, we wanted them to go forward so that at least we have a feeler how it is behaving, whether there are takers, whether they are not takers, what are the pain points, can we address those pain points right in the policy level itself. So one of the point that came is the limit of openness, which as per the act, which have been misunderstood so far by the regulators as well, is that it is limited to 1 megawatt consumers only. But if you read the finer points in the act, it doesn't restrict you to 1 megawatt. Maybe news to most of you here, sitting here, but if please see that language only says that within 5 years, you have to come to a level of 1 megawatt, but in no way it restricts you to bring it below that 1 megawatt. But still some people thought that, okay, why don't ministry clarify if that's the so? And that is how we are coming out in the rules that, okay, if you want a clarification, we'll say that, okay, you can do it up to 100 kilowatt. And we have not put any restrictions onto the captive consumers. Captive consumers can have any amount of construct that they would like to have it. So this was one pain point which was reflected to us. The other was the openness charges, wherein we have said that for RE there will not be any kind of additional surcharge as long as they are connected to the system and they are already paying you can say fixed charges or some kind of a monthly rentals to the DISCOMS. To such consumers, there will not be any additional surcharge. So, and similar goes with the standby charges and other charges, which we have tried to simplify. And I think we have mentioned that it will be only the surcharge, wheeling charges and the transmission charges, and mostly no other charges that needs to be levied to the openness consumers. The idea is to facilitate more and more people coming forward themselves and trying to opt for going green. As regards the potential in this particular area, I see a huge potential. Could be some teething troubles. I think what the study of Ms. Sahai was reflecting, I was keenly seeing that against the 5 enablers, you have listed around 7 to 8 barriers. But I take those barriers as clubbed as maybe 1 or 2, not more than that. And what was I was very much surprised to see something like the very first bullet saying that it is bureaucratic. I really don't know what is that bureaucratic thing that comes in the way of enabling it or as a barrier. I think nobody as on date feels that it has to be a barrier. We all are aware of the problems, and that is how we are trying to find the solutions. The nature is known to us. Nature are intermittent. So that cannot be treated as a barrier. That the only thing is it needs to be facilitated. So the moment, say, solar is not there, in that hour, non-solar hours, how do I supplement to the consumers? If the wind is not available, how do I really supplement during those periods when the wind is not available? And this is precisely what we are trying to do as a policy maker or as the DISCOMS or as the state commissions. There could be variance because we have different state, different commissions. The thought process can be different. The construct can be different. There cannot be only a single solution to a problem. Problem can be one, but solutions can be different. And naturally, the best solution which comes and goes forward or taken forward will survive, others will die down. So, coming to the construct again, back to the CNI consumers, I think I had a chance to hear take few presentations on the virtual PPAs as well for the CNI consumers. Those concepts are really good, and I think that's again going to be another way forward wherein we can think of going towards that virtual PPAs or even facilitating those consumers in those lines. Further to that is either we go towards that PPA construct or maybe we can think of going towards market construct as well. And that in the market construct we are again going to change. Even though we have two products right now which is exclusive for the green power, and let me tell you that nowhere in the world we have any exclusive segment in the market, whether it is European market or it is US market or Australian market. You take any market for that matter, you will not find an exclusive RE product in the market segment wherein you can go and buy electricity as a RE, as a renewable product. But since we have a different construct in India, we thought that let us introduce this. I know there is a counter argument also into this, that we are splitting the market and that is how the liquidity in the market will go down. But anyway, because of the construct and because of the philosophy that we have been adopting in our country, we thought that let's go ahead and give an opportunity to the buyers as well as to the seller, because both needs to be facilitated and they need to have a platform wherein they can either buy or sell electricity at a ease of their transactions. Since there, that is how we introduced first in the DAM construct, and later on, sorry, in the term ahead construct initially, and then going forward we introduced it in the GDAM. And the other reason that it gave us is that because there is a larger predictability in the lower time frame, that is how the things can be worked out easily. And after the introduction of RTM and the rule that we took out, that is the must-run rule, wherein we had tried to address the concerns of the curtailment, etc., how the curtailment will be addressed. Earlier, let me tell you, my own experience is before I took out that rule, I used to get a number of complaints from most of the developers as well as from some of the renewable rich states that there are issues of curtailment. After that rule, where we had mandated that the power has to be mandatorily sold into the market, I have, at least in ministry, I have not received even a single complaint against the curtailment. Maybe it might be happening somewhere, but nobody has come and complained me that there is a curtailment on account of this. Because the order itself is very clear that if you have electricity, if technically it is feasible, if there is no grid constraint, go sell into the market, recover whatever you can, and the balance will be paid by the PPA holders. So there are twin advantages to this. One is the electricity goes into the system. It doesn't become as a deemed something like that, which has a number of nuances. That the moment you try to treat it as a deemed one, there is the issues related to calculations of it. Somebody raises the question whether the sun was really shining at that time, whether the wind was blowing at that time or not. Is the generation which is being compensated is right or wrong? And most important was that the consumer were not getting the benefit of RE in the grid, which they are supposed to get. So now it has to be mandatorily sold into the grid, and that is how the consumer will start getting that electricity and consume that electricity. As a developer, their capacity will not get bottled. They will get some money, whatever they can recover from the market, and the balance is also ascertained through the PPA holders. So these are some of the constructs which we thought, as and when we got the problems listed, and at least to my knowledge, which came to the ministry's knowledge, whether it was power or renewable energy, we tried to see that those issues are addressed, solved. And I know still there will be a lot of issues, a lot of problems the sector faces, and as and when I think we'll come and we'll get the solutions. I think we'll try to resolve it. And going forward, I think there's a huge potential in CNI consumers with the DISCOMS needs to facilitate. I know it's going to be, DISCOMS are right now sitting on both sides of it, either whether they can facilitate or they should not facilitate. It's high-paying consumers going out of their bucket. It may become unviable. I mean, all those questions will keep on coming. But at the same time, during this crisis, I think present power crisis also, what we have seen is it is the renewables which is coming to our rescue. And let me give you a figure. I think just day before yesterday, you must have seen the news item that we have crossed the highest ever peak demand in the country of 201 gigawatt, which has surpassed even the last year's peak demand. And at that time, with the support of solar itself was around 31 gigawatt. So it's a substantial support we got from solar at that peak time. And now the peak has also shifted. Peak has also shifted to the day hours instead of earlier concept of peak having in the evening peak, and that is around somewhere around between 7 to 9 p.m. Earlier it used to be there. But of late now, because of the construct of shifting the agriculture load or shifting the load from the peak hours to the non-peak hours, so-called the earlier non-peak hours, now it is the peak hour itself. So what is more important going forward is going to be in terms of a demand response, in terms of the demand management, in terms of trying to see where there is availability, and at that time the demand should try to keep shifting. And this is going to be a larger role, and whose participants will be the DISCOMS as well as the consumer themselves. DISCOMS, they can predict, they can at least try to have that kind of a construct. But from the consumer perspective, unless you have consumer awareness or you try to involve consumers also into the business, you will not get that kind of feel. And that is how the demand response in a larger platform or in the larger construct is required to be introduced into the system. And to my understanding, that is going to happen as we go along, and we try to see that more and more automation takes place in the distribution business, maybe with smart meters or maybe with some other constructs, which is already being pushed by the Government of India. In the recent scheme of reform distribution linked scheme, which is of around 3 lakh crore, there also the major focus is on the smart meters. And the moment we shift from the normal meters to the smart meter, all the constructs of TOD tariffs or in terms of accounting, in terms of facilitation, in terms of demand response, all these kind of constructs will start happening at that particular point of time. So what is required is we need to change the thinking process going forward from the earlier concept to the new concept, and I'm sure the young people sitting here will definitely give us more brighter ideas to take the sector forward. With that, I'll stop. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening address to the audience on the issue. In your presence, we would also now like to launch our tool Elevate, which aims to support DISCOMs understand and manage the grid impacts of electric vehicles. We have developed this tool with the support of one of the DISCOMs in Delhi.
Electricity powers 2 out of every 100 cars sold today. Electric vehicles, or EVs, account for 1% of the global vehicle stock, and this number is projected to grow to 16% by 2025. If electrified fully by 2050, road transport alone will contribute to almost 25% of the global electricity demand. EVs will benefit the environment by reducing local air pollution. Additionally, it will decrease oil consumption for fuel. However, a drastic growth of EVs would put a strain on the electric distribution system in certain pockets. In current circumstances, a distribution transformer stays underutilized for about 60 to 80% of the year. This is bound to change as electricity consumption grows. To meet this demand, there is an urgent need for a quick rollout of grid upgrades along with charging infrastructure across the globe. Electric utilities need to improve predictions of EV charging patterns at the micro and the macro levels. Design tariff incentives to encourage consumers to charge their EVs at non-peak slots. And lastly, a plan for low-cost solar and battery upgrades instead of installing oversized distribution transformers that lie idle for 80% of the time. In order to simplify this task, WRI-India and BSES Rajdhani Power Limited, or BRPL, is developing a platform, Elevate, that will cater to the needs of utilities or DISCOMS. The platform is being developed with an aim to support utilities or DISCOMS to run real-time, quick simulations for better investment planning and help support coordinated growth of EVs and the electric power sector with a long-term goal of powering EVs through renewable energy. In the long run, Elevate can provide solutions to adapt to the much-needed electricity demands for the future of EVs. Log on to elevate.gpmdg.org and check out the tool now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Prasad, for those extremely important points and also putting the electricity sector in perspective, the broader energy transition. We have one more speaker in this session, and I'm she's actually joining us virtually. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Leetha to this meeting. Leetha Tawney is a commissioner with the Oregon Public Utility Commission. Hi, Leetha. And Leetha was previously director of the Utility Innovation and the Polsky Chair for Renewable Energy at WRI. So I'm particularly happy to welcome Leetha back to a WRI event. She's an expert on electricity markets, utility business models, state regulations, clean energy deployment, and led our work focused on large customers and buying strategies. She is focused in her current role as a commissioner, is focused on proactively adopting regulation and the grid to rapidly changing economics of energy so that consumers and communities can reap the benefits, and importantly, that frontline communities are not left behind. So with that, Leetha, can I hand this over to you?
Thanks so much, Bharat. Can I check that you can hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yes, we can hear you, but maybe the volume needs to be increased. Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thanks so much for having me this morning, this evening here on the West Coast in the U.S. I'm in the state of Oregon. I've been following the news of your heat waves and the strain it's putting on your grid. And I have to say we had exactly the same issue in Oregon last June, far out of season, extreme heat that stressed our grid far beyond any of our planning parameters. And it really highlighted the urgency of decarbonizing and also all of the challenges that you've been discussing all morning about what that decarbonization is really going to require to deliver reliable, affordable energy consistently across all of the customers. I've really enjoyed hearing the analysis this morning, and I hear many echoes of the challenges we're facing as state regulators in Oregon. So it's lovely to be back with my WRI colleagues. As Bharat said, I had the privilege of working with WRI-India when I was working with the US team, and now I'm a regulator in the state of Oregon. You know, in Oregon, well, when I was with WRI, I did a lot of work with the renewable energy buyers, with the CNI customers in the US that wanted to procure renewable energy. And it helped to instigate the conversation between the CNI customers and the utilities in Oregon and several other states. I live in Oregon, and so wanted, of course, to work on the local grid as well as in other states across the country. And in Oregon, the CNI customers really had to begin the conversation with the DISCOMS, the local utilities. Here in Oregon, we still have vertically integrated utilities. We only have a little bit of deregulation, only a little bit of access to direct access or open access. Mostly it's a quite traditional model in Oregon still, and don't have a regional transmission organization. Our wholesale market is entirely done through bilateral trades. But so in many ways, you're ahead of us. But in Oregon, the customers reached out, and what we really found was that the traditional customer agents that had been assigned to these large, really important customers of the utilities were quite out of touch with how fast things were changing inside the customer's own organizations. But when those key account managers, as they're called in the US, started to understand just how important renewable energy was to the large corporate buyers and really began to be educated on the opportunity, new options really started to open up. Some of the utilities in the US began to understand why it was so important to meet the customer's desire for renewable energy in a constructive way, or those buyers would begin to advocate for alternatives that cut the utilities out of the equation. In Oregon, what we found was that, in fact, the regulators were not interested. The staff of the Regulatory Commission was quite opposed to the idea of CNI customers pursuing unique products, in part because they were very concerned that it would create a cross-subsidy, an inappropriate cross-subsidy between by the residential customers for the CNI customers. Very much some of the same sorts of issues that you're concerned about. If the CNI customers leave or don't pay their full share, and in your case, pay for several of the programs, who's left to support the grid? It took a significant amount of time to sort of move that regulatory conversation forward in Oregon, and included legislative change, legislative direction to the commission. Over those years, as that process was unfolding, I happened to join the commission and ended up making some of the policy decisions as pilots emerged. And we were able to set up initially a pilot program for green tariff. It took several years to really address the concerns of advocates that somehow residential customers would be harmed. And so what we did is we set up a rate structure where it's not a premium product, but it is no cost added. And so the CNI customers, much like I hear you discussing, pay their full tariffs the way they are structured today. They also pay for the renewable energy. And then the utility essentially credits them or buys back that renewable energy at a competitive price. So at a price that is competitive with what that utility would have to go out and buy renewable energy for on the marketplace today. And so it ends up being almost no or absolutely no premium for the CNI customer. It sort of passes through their hands. And it ends up being relatively low-cost renewable energy for the utility and all the other ratepayers. And most importantly, the C&I customer stays in the system paying all of the other fees and charges to support grid planning and all of the capacity that they rely on when the intermittent renewable is not available, and so on and so forth. So it really limits the opportunity for cost shifting, but it isn't automatically a premium product. And I think that has been very attractive. The first offering we did, that the first utility opened an offering, it was a limited size and it filled up in 5 minutes. And so we had to then begin a process of figuring out what the next phase would be and how many megawatts would be offered and so on. And we have continued to do that and unfold that process, evaluate how does it work. Sometimes for some of the pilots, the utility has offered a single sort of product, and smaller C&I customers or cities. In our case, many of our cities have clean energy targets and are not in a position to procure renewable energy under their own budgets. And so this is a really good solution for them. And in other cases, the utilities acted more as a broker and brought in a PPA under this tariff for a specific large C&I customer. So we've had experience with both. And I think what's been really positive is we've been able to grow piece by piece and really prove out that, in fact, this isn't costing residential customers. It is, in fact, ensuring that C&I customers stay in the system, continue to pay for all of the policy and the complexity of this shift in the generation, but also get what they want, which is the more renewable energy in the grid in a credible and meaningful way. Now, in Oregon, across the US West, much like I hear you discussing, we're getting to a place of renewable penetration where new reliability challenges are emerging. We're retiring coal plants very quickly, which is great. We need to. And we will have a challenge around how to meet load, particularly on cold winter mornings in Oregon. We have a significant heating load, and as there is more pressure to shift natural gas heating, we use a great deal of natural gas for home heating in the Pacific Northwest of the US. As that load shifts to electrify, as transportation electrifies, we're going to have a significant challenge around how to meet net peak, that peak that is left over when all of the distributed generation comes off the sunsets. And I think what's really exciting about a green tariff offering, and where we've been trying to push the conversation, although now the utilities are very interested and the C&I customers are a little more hesitant, is into exactly the issues that you were just discussing. What are the opportunities to use demand response and load shifting, or the customer's own gensets, or their battery storage capacity to support the grid in those peak moments? One of our utilities already has a genset program for traditional backup generators, and they can tap those. In the heat wave last June, they tapped every last one of those diesel gensets. That's not ideal, but it kept the grid supported. And you think about the fact that these customers still have a partnership with the utility. They haven't gone to open access. As the utility needs to layer in more and more of those programs, there is a partner to work with, because that customer is still in close relationship with the utility. So we've been trying to move the conversation to that hour by hour matching. What would that look like? How could you provide renewables or zero carbon energy on more of an hour by hour basis instead of an annual netting to solve the reliability challenge that is looming out there for us? And if those customers bring significant capacity to the system, like through battery storage, that's a real value to residential customers, and maybe the credit can reflect that. And so I think there's a lot to do at the frontier here to continue the partnership as we integrate all these renewables. So I'm really excited about how that more granular product might evolve, although you may get there before us at the rate you're going. So really appreciate hearing all the challenges you're having. They really reflect similar challenges that we're facing. And I think the urgency of decarbonizing is abundantly clear to all of us. And so excited to see the innovations that emerge from your work. And I'm happy to pause there. If it's possible to take questions, I'm very interested in dialogue.
Do you have any questions?
Hi, this is Ghanshyam from Ministry of Power. In fact, I had been to Oregon State Commission, but it was quite, it was in 2001 when we were thinking about switching over from the normal regime to a regulatory regime. And as a part of Regulatory Commission, I had visited Oregon as well. And that time I had gone to FERC and other places. And I think that time there was a concept of cooperative electricity distribution system. I don't know whether it is still continues there in Oregon. Second, actually, I just wanted to ask you is, do you ever conceive in Oregon committing or designing a tariff so that the customer, any customer, whether it is CNI or any other customer, he can claim himself to be 100% renewable? Because by virtue of the nature of renewable itself, we don't have the capacity available of renewables throughout the day. So there could be some other concept which can take it forward. So is there any thought process right now in Oregon on this particular topic? Thank you.
There absolutely is, and yes, in fact, we do have what we call in the U.S. public power, which is more like a state-owned enterprise, in a cooperative, but like a state-owned enterprise in many ways. Bonneville Power Administration provides, but I don't get to regulate them. I regulate the traditional investor-owned utilities. But onto your question, absolutely. So in the U.S. and in Oregon, we have used renewable energy certificates to do an annual netting. We do it for our renewable portfolio standard, and the corporate buyers do it for their voluntary procurement. And when there was only a little bit of renewable penetration in the system, that made a lot of sense, because anything you added displaced something that was fossil. You likely pushed in the US, you likely displaced a gas peaker in particular. And that is becoming more and more challenging as penetration of renewables increases, as you're pointing to. And so it's a little bit unclear right now how to make that transition, but the need for it is becoming more obvious. And so I think that's where we're interested in how you might take green tariffs sort of to the next level. And in 2021, our Oregon legislature passed legislation that allowed communities to explore green tariffs. So a city could decide to craft a product, a portfolio of zero carbon options with the utility, and then sign up everybody in their within their municipal boundaries for that tariff. And then customers could choose to opt out if they wanted to. They didn't want to participate, and they wanted to use the utility's existing tariff. And so we're tasked now with writing the rules for how that might work. And I think that's one of the real open questions is, what could you do in that portfolio to make it closer to 24/7, 8760 hours, so that you know you're really displacing the places we lean on fossil significantly. And how do you account for it? It's not clear right now quite what instrument you'll use, but those are exactly the questions we're grappling with.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Anyone? If not, just wanted to, I'm really glad we had you also join us, Leetha, because I think when we talk about transition, what we usually think is, somebody else has done this somewhere and we just need to look around and learn and copy and adapt sort of thing. But the energy transition is not at all like that. Everyone is at a different place and everyone has a potential to learn from each other. And as you mentioned, and Mr. Prasad also mentioned, on some things, India is perhaps a few steps ahead. In some other things, there's lots more that we can learn. And but end of the day, we have to all, as a planet, move in the same direction. So really glad we had this really extremely useful conversation. And I want to thank both of you for joining us and sharing your thoughts. I know we are running behind schedule, but I hope the rest of you will agree with me that this was a really useful opportunity for us to hear both from how the government of India is thinking at this point, but also seeing how a regulatory commissioner in Oregon is also grappling with very, very similar issues at this given point of time. So thank you again, and now I'll hand this back to Niharika.
Thank you again, Leetha, for your very informative address to the audience. I would now like to invite Mr. Deepak Krishnan, Associate Director of Energy Program, WRI-India, to introduce our panelists and to kindly take forward today's discussions. Before we begin, there's also a piece of information. We have tea and coffee being served in the hall, so you may please kindly help yourself.
Thank you, Bharat, Mr. Prasad, and Leetha. It was really great to hear your thoughts. So I think without further ado, I'll get into the panel discussion since we are running late, and hopefully we'll be able to run through the questions quickly. First, I would like to invite the panelists for today. Mr. Himanshu Chawla from DERC, if you could please join us on the stage. Mr. Chawla is with the Tariff Division at DERC, and we are quite keen to hear what DERC's thoughts are on this issue. Next, we have Mr. Shashi Goyal from Renew Power, who would be representing the views of a renewable energy developer, and hopefully we can also request you to talk to us about what your customers are thinking about, green products that they're looking for. We have Mr. Sunil K. Sharma from Bypls joining us. So we have the DISCOM view also represented on this panel. And Dr. Vasundhara Sen from Symbiosis Center for Management and Human Resource Development. In addition to her role as a panelist, I'll also call upon her to throw some light as a co-author on the study that Vandita presented. So as a format, what I would like to suggest is have your initial thoughts on, what are your views on the C&I, utility and RE dynamics. Maybe hear from all four of you for a minute or two, and then get into specific questions. Thank you.
Just before coming to specific C&I customers, I would just like to mention few points like how DRC has been promoting renewable energy in Delhi. Basically, how are we promoting embedded generation to be more picked up in Delhi rather than relying upon certain, because Delhi is a landlocked city, so we don't have any much spaces for installing ground mounted solar or setting up a plant directly for buying green power. So one of the very innovative policy which we had launched in 2015 regulations, which is net metering regulations. And why I would call it innovative policy, because most of the states at the end of the financial year, they treat the surplus energy as the lapsed energy. But in Delhi, we give it to the consumers such surplus energy at APPC rate. And this is one of the part which has picked up the net metering to the levels of around 170 megawatt in Delhi. So considering only the limited rooftop spaces, we have installed somewhat around 170 megawatt, and this is benefiting the consumer also in reducing their electricity bills. Parallelly, it is helping DISCOMS also in meeting their renewable purchase obligation targets. So net metering now, I think it's a common across all the state commissions. In 2019, we launched virtual net metering and group net metering policy. This is first time in India it has been done. Net metering, if you see as a premise, the injection and the draw point both are at the same place. It is the premise of a household, of the owner. But as far as virtual net metering or group net metering goes, the injection and draw point are different. And this is where the game changes. For example, if you, around a month back, I was called upon by one of the commission to assess them how to pick up the renewable energy in their state when they have limited rooftop spaces. So they have spaces available in the rural areas, but the demand is there in the urban side. So in that cases, the role of VNM and GNM becomes a bigger picture. Here what has happened in Delhi, for example, if you have a house in Saket and you have a factory in Okhla of the same consumer, so you can install a rooftop in your factory in Okhla and get the benefit of the same in your house in Saket. So the draw point and the injection point becomes different, and through some commercial arrangement this is being done. And this has also picked up very beautifully in Delhi, and we have somewhat around 5 megawatt of VNM, GNM already installed, and somewhat around 25 megawatt in pipeline, which are under the approval stages for feasibility and all those things with the DISCOMS. So in total, if you see, we have 170 megawatt of embedded net metering and 5 to 7 megawatt of embedded VNM and GNM in Delhi. As far as C&I customers goes, so basically those are the big customers only which are opting for such VNM. Big colleges are there, so what they do for 2-3 colleges, 2-3 schools, they just bundle up and they get into an agreement, into a PPA with some developer who installs at some outskirt area of Delhi, Najafgarh or somewhere in the ground mounted solar, and they take the benefit in the schools and colleges. So in a way they reduce their consumption, and this also helps in meeting the RPO compliances of the DISCOM. But like in the earlier discussion, I was hearing means focus, definitely it has to be there on the green power. It is one of the Millennium Development Goals also of the United Nations, sustainable environment, and in order to be sustained, green power is must. But if we see the whole circle of the power sector, the more we rely upon new PPAs, but there is no scope of abandoning old PPAs. And there comes the concept of the fixed cost, which the burden is already being borne by the consumers at large. For example, if we talk about statistics of Delhi, the peak demand is somewhat around 7,400 megawatt, which touched on 3rd of July 2019. We have long-term PPA somewhat around 7,000 megawatt itself. But in winters, the demand goes as below as 4,000 megawatt. So we have left with a surplus capacities of around 3,000 megawatt. The similar case is for other states also. So now these surplus capacities, they are sold at very less rate in exchanges, because those surpluses are mostly in the off-peak hours of the day, or mostly, or you can say off-peak season, mainly in the winter season. So the purchase cost, because fixed cost liabilities show short that we need to pay to the generators, but we are not scheduling that power because the demand is not required or that power is not coming under the merit order dispatch. So this is one big concern which needs to be addressed, because we have 400 gigawatt of installed capacity, and out of that, just only 2-3 days back, the peak has touched somewhat around 201 gigawatt. So the stranded assets, we need to think somewhere about how to utilize such stranded assets effectively for meeting ancillary services requirement or making them as a storage facilities. Basically the pumped hydro, they can be more pushed into the storage part. So that's the C&I part. If you see, we already have open access regime in Delhi, and mainly the commercial and industrial consumers only are taking benefit out of it. But more at macro level, we need to see how RE can effectively overcome the stranded capacities and how the system can function as a whole so that RE can supply us the power on 24/7 basis.
As regards my views on C&I customer are concerned, I would treat C&I customer just like as an employee of an organization who is working hard, but the organization is not valuing its work. So C&I customer, obviously, their tariff is always more than average cost of supply in most of the states. But generally, it has been seen that DISCOM put on hindrances in terms of if they want to avail open access and all. So the customer has grown up now, and the DISCOM has to really see in terms of that they have to value, just like an organization values its employees, good employees. Similarly, the DISCOM has to value its C&I customers, because they are taking most of the load of their tariff. So as far as renewables is concerned, I would say people say that RE is an intermittent source of electricity, but I would say it is the beauty of it that when solar is available, the solar is available. At night, solar is not available. So there is no technical minimum constant, just like thermal and gas. So basically, if anybody wants to, any DISCOM wants to basically shape up its demand, and they want to just shape up the supply in terms of that can easily be done in terms of RE. So now the market has grown up. It is not like that RE cannot be scheduled. There are DSM regulations already in place, and definitely the C&I customer has got that education, and they are basically they are now focused towards the cost, because obviously the RE has the cost of RE is lesser as compared to the cost of thermal stations, and the fuel supply is also not an issue in terms of RE. So when we say about coal, there are 5 qualities of coal. The GCV varies. Then there is a coal issue. There is a coal linkage issue. Then imported coal comes into the picture. It again, there is a transportation cost as well. Whereas when we talk about RE, there is no such constant, no transportation, no 5 qualities of coal. That GCV will vary and all that. It depends upon only the place as to what is the potential of that place to capture that RE or the solar or wind. And there are times to come when tidal or ocean energy will also come into the picture. And obviously, we all know that in large chunk, India is basically a peninsular region. So definitely, this tidal and ocean is also going to play an important role for meeting India's demand.
Thank you. I will, I just want to highlight 2 points to begin with. Since morning, a lot has been spoken, and it's amply clear that the distribution companies and CNI consumers each have their own points to make, which are absolutely right in its own places. So I think as far as the DISCOM problem is concerned, we've seen bailout packages, we've seen new instruments being launched in the RE space, which is a win-win for both DISCOM and the consumer. But there are structural issues in the sector which will probably need to be addressed. For example, maybe we need to relook at the way the tariff economics works. Maybe an inverted tariff structure something that could be looked at. And maybe it's time to look at time of day tariff implementation in other sectors. So far, we've only seen that to be launched in the CNI. Maybe we need to pilot it in the residential and see if that works as a good demand management system. So, so something structural needs to be fixed in the DISCOMS. As far as CNI consumers are concerned, I want to highlight this from the study that most large CNI corporate consumers are falling short of options to meet 100% of their demand from RE. So we've met consumers who've done rooftop solar and maxed out their roof spaces. They have also done open access both in wind and solar. They have the keenness to do it further, but they are not finding ways to do it. So I think the market now demands or would benefit from getting new instruments and models in place. So like Himanshu was saying, virtual net metering, group net metering, virtual PPAs, and maybe even virtual power plants. I mean, the new concepts that is now being spoken about. So this could bridge the, the missing link between the sector and the consumers. Yeah. Thank you.
So, so DISCOMS come last, so I just want to be brief because most of the aspects have been covered. But let me just brief you on the role of DISCOM, because we have a universal supply obligation. We have to see each and every customer equally. And all customers are equal for us, and we cannot go for so much of segmentation. And so I must thank our honorable regulator, because they have been coming out with enabling regulations, and we are very happy to participate. With regards to RE enablement, we are helping out our customers, be it C&I customers or residential customers. As per MNRE Phase 2 program, we are already mandated to be a nodal agency. So yes, of course, VNM and GNM we are happy to implement. There's a lot of activity going on, and we have got our own internal RE generation plants. We are actively adding rooftop net metering connections. With C&I customers also, we specifically under SPICE program with GIZ, we had done this focused awareness come interaction program, where we brought in vendors as well as so many C&I customers, and we identified 800 kilowatts of demand, so that C&I customers can also move towards this transition. But for C&I customers, there is only one major parameter that works, is your financials and the economic parameters. So yes, market-based instruments enabling regulations, we are happy to welcome, and we can enable this transition as we go forward. DISCOMs are very progressive, especially in under guidance of Regulatory Commission in Delhi. We have been implementing these things, but as we proceed, I think we are quite open and we can make this transition happen. But we need to have robust mechanisms in place so that interests of all customers can suitably preserved. That is the input from my side. Thank you.
Thank you for your views. And Vasundhara, I'll come to you first. So you did mention that large C&I consumers are falling short of RE options, but I would argue that fine, at this moment they're falling short, but they have the capacity and also the financial strength to experiment with new technologies, possibly even stay in the race longer for whether it is lobbying or whatever is the term that we use for it, to ensure that policies which favor their transition to 100% would come along. But what about MSMEs? They are a large segment of the C&I base. Right now, they are the ones without the options, but at the same time, they are under pressure from, let's say, the central company in the supply chain to go green and all that. So what are your thoughts on how this transition could benefit them as well?
So let me highlight what we found. So in the study, we spoke to 286 CNI consumers, out of which 101 can be categorized as large corporates and 185 were SME consumers from the 5 study states. Now there are 3 things that I want to highlight here. One is SMEs especially. I would say the awareness about how to procure RE is not only lacking, but I would say it is absent. I would like to share the fact that when we were speaking with them, they were asking us such that they get informed. So when our team, along with the survey team, was speaking with them, they would ask us, okay, how can I leverage on open access? How can I do a rooftop solar if I don't have a roof? Is there a provision for it? So I think somewhere the awareness piece for SMEs is a big piece that needs to be taken up. And the way to disseminate this awareness could be multiple. Nodal agencies can do it, think tanks can do it. So the answer is still out there to be found. The second thing about SMEs that I want to point out, what we found from the study, is that finance is an extremely big issue for them. Being first-time borrowers, commercial lending is not working out for them. Let's also understand that commercial lending from commercial banks is going to get tougher in the days to come. Putting the economics into it, we are looking at very high rates of inflation, which is going to translate into higher lending rates going forward. That's the first issue. So bank lending is going to get tighter. We are also probably going to look at very cautious lending from the banks, right? Because COVID has led to defaults, and the probability of non-performing assets is going to increase. So SMEs are especially going to face the brunt of it. In light of that, new financing mechanisms need to be devised, and that's one of the recommendations we've made in the study, that look at something else apart from let's devise new metrics to assess creditworthiness of SME borrowers. And thirdly, I think MSMEs are the most interested in new instruments, which does not require capex. So in fact, 90% of the SMEs we asked, they said we want to do renewables, but we don't have the capacity, the capital capacity. So we are looking forward to green tariff instruments. Even though it asks us to pay a little bit of premium, we are fine with it. So we kind of saw a dichotomy. The large corporates have done it, have done all kind of procurement, so therefore they show resistance to green tariffs. But the MSMEs who do not want to put in the capital are more welcoming of green tariffs, which is an easier way to do renewables. So I think for MSMEs, new products is the need of the hour. So whether it is green open access, whether it is green tariff, only time will tell. But I think that's where the answer for MSME lies. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasundhara. And I think that will directly come to you, Mr. Sharma. Do you see opportunities to leverage the MSME base? And based on what Vasundhara said, given that a lot of them have said that they're willing to even pay a premium. In fact, in the study, we also did a sort of what is your limit for a premium. Some of them are okay with 1 rupee, some of them said only 50 paise. So based on this, do you think it's possible for you to design some granular products? And in addition, if you can let us know if you already started thinking on those lines, that would be.
Yeah, so I'll talk about our key objective is to keep the tariffs low and make it more economical. So as the regulator guides us, so we are happy to participate. So yes, of course, but I would certainly look for, as a DISCOM, that we should empower customers more as we go forward, because green transition is going to help us and all the stakeholders. So we definitely want to work with our honorable regulator. As soon as we start deliberating on this, we are happy to participate on these aspects.
Just adding to what has been said, like Ms. Sen pointed out, MSMEs, what I understood, there is one problem, what they pointed, they don't have a rooftop, so where to install? So for such consumers only, DRC had brought out VNM and GNM policies. So maybe you can educate them to take benefit out of such policies. They can get ground-mounted install solar anywhere in the part of Delhi and take benefit of the same in the premises. So this is, but green tariff, if you are talking about with a premium of 50 paise or 1 rupee, but I am not sure whether green tariff is just a commercial arrangement or will it promote more expansion, additional technologies to get added up. That we need to see. If in green tariff we make a suitable amendment with a consumer opting for green tariff, that for that additional quantum, there has to be additional capacity addition somewhere in some part of the country. Then and only then it is beneficial, otherwise it is just a commercial settlement, in my point of view.
That's a fair point, and additionality hopefully going forward will once the concept picks up, right now as a commercial arrangement, hopefully we'll see more of stringent requirements like additionality also coming in. But just sticking on to a couple of more questions that I had for you is, what can regulators do to create this atmosphere of pilots and innovation, say sandbox arrangements? Are there things that DRC is thinking on those lines?
Last year already we had conducted one sandbox study. It was done by Tata Power. We had given pilot approval for the same. It was peer-to-peer trading through blockchain technology. And it was somewhere around 200, 250 consumers participated. They are in-house customers. The results are under analysis by the commission. And if we found it suitable, then definitely we will do some amendments and we will try to commercially launch it. And I think UPRC has already done it. In their net metering regulations, there is already a concept of blockchain. And I think when Andhra or some other commission have also implemented blockchain technology. So definitely we are analyzing the results of peer-to-peer trading through blockchain platform. And if it's found suitable, then we will go ahead.
Sure. And do you also envisage within the electricity sector, just like how in telecom we have these bouquet of tariff plans, do you think that's even a possibility in this space? What if you think it's a possibility? Where do we need to start, and how do we move to get to that stage, so that there are options for different consumers, different categories? They can choose what they want. Ultimately, it boils down to choice, but you need to give them those menu of options. Is that even something you're thinking of?
You see, those all things are already there, but there are 2-3 inherent problems in the distribution sector if we talk about. First is the cross subsidy. If we talk about Delhi statistics, there are somewhat around 62 lakh consumers. Out of that 62 lakh consumers, 70% of the consumers are availing electricity at below average cost of supply. And that we are also bound to set tariff in such a fashion, because tariff is designed as per section 62(4) of the Act. We need to give some benefit of income also. Low paying capacity consumers, they need to pay below average cost of supply. C&I customers, they are high paying consumers, they will pay, their average billing rate is definitely more than the average cost of supply. But still, the tariff structure of Delhi is very crux. Earlier, somewhat around 5-6 years back, it was 4 pages tariff schedule. Now it is less than half-page tariff schedule. And in the earlier session, you were talking about electric vehicles also. So let me just give small developments like what we had done in the EV space also as a DRC. So we were the first regulatory commission to launch charging station tariff category somewhere in 2017. And till date, it is a promotional tariff. There are no fixed charges in the public charging stations. And the energy charges are also very less. It is 50% of the cost of supply. It is just 4 rupees per unit. So that is the main reason we have more than so many public charging stations installed in the Delhi. Parallelly, one more thing we did in 2017 itself, which has now been adopted under the EV policy of MOP. For example, if a consumer charges EV from his home or from his shop, then there will not be a misuse case booked by a DISCOM. And he is allowed to charge his EV from his domestic, from his residential supply or from his house without availing any separate connection. So there is no need to go for separate connection, apply for separate meter, all these things. So all these hurdles, we have already cracked it down in the year 2017. And that is why EV space is also picked up quite beautifully in Delhi. And one thing which I told earlier also, we need to also see the fixed cost of the conventional PPAs before going into so much of penetration of RE. You see, demand is not picking up so harsh as it was in the year 2015 or 16. We already have some tied up PPAs of till 25 years. that fixed cost burden is already being borne by the consumers at large. And some additional RE, if it comes up without the demand in picture, and such conventional PPAs are already there whose fixed cost is borne by the consumer. So this philosophy also we need to see, and how to better utilize the stranded assets of 200 gigawatt, which is lying idle in the system. So that I think has to be better managed.
Understood. Thank you. If I could now come up.
I would just like to add on that just like telecom, we cannot have flat tariff structure for different customers because obviously the demand is different. Some are manufacturing industries which run 24/7. Delhi, of course, Delhi has an entirely different kind of customer profile because the industries are not there. So basically, as a RE generator, when the customer comes to me for open access, we have to study their demand and we have to design the RE in such a way that RE/RTC is going to cater their need at all times. Just like if their peak demand goes during daytime, then obviously the more solar will help them out. In case it is a 24/7 manufacturing industry, then obviously I have to go for storage as well. So one size suits all cannot do in these kind of things.
True, absolutely. But my question was more on, can we think of plans like 25% RE, 50% RE, bands like that, not necessarily a flat tariff. So I'd read about it somewhere, so I thought I'll just seek your views. But
I think you have already picked up some differentiation has to be there with regard to RE, but generically I think you have already covered it. We have a universal supply obligation, so we cannot do a lot of segmentation and we cannot offer so many plans, and of course we have to see viability of the whole business. But yes, some differentiation can be there and there can be marginally different tariffs in case we want to adopt RE. Of course, under supervision of a regulator.
Basically, I'll just suggest that why not DISCOMS can go to the RE generator, and why not DISCOMS can just give their demand data to the RE generators and let it be their headache as to how this RE profile has to be it has to be developed. And of course coal and all that is definitely a issue nowadays. So the variable cost of this conventional power plant, that is even higher as compared to solar. Right, solar has come down to 2 rupee 40 paise or 2 rupee 50 paise per unit. So definitely it can be developed in that manner. And I would suggest why to let go C&I customers to open access. Ultimately, you are going to charge the open access surcharge, cross subsidy surcharge, additional surcharge, everything. Let it be there and just try to bring your power purchase cost down, so that to provide the benefit of the tariff to these C&I customers.
Absolutely. In fact, that was the next question I was going to ask you. So, as a renewable energy developer, and you could also possibly play the role as aggregator of customers. How do you see conversations between the demand side and you as a generator and DISCOM? Can there be systematic conversations to achieve what you exactly suggested? That why let go of these C&I consumers? Work in some way, like as Leetha was mentioning, where the DISCOM can come in as a broker between the two, facilitate the PPA, or if there is any other mechanism where the DISCOM has it as a pass-through to them. So do you see the possibility of such systematic efforts coming along?
Yes, definitely. With this draft open access rules, green open access rules coming into the picture, a customer who is having a demand of more than 100 kilowatt can also opt for green energy, right? So RE is now no more obligation. It has become the necessity. It is the need of the hour in terms of the climate condition, you can say, or in terms of lower tariff, you can say. So definitely DISCOM has to think innovatively, not in terms of only conventional manner. Obviously the approach has to get changed with time. So power purchase cost optimization, because it forms 80% of our tariff. So power purchase cost has to be optimized in such a manner that the C&I customer get the benefit as well. Because domestic tariff is already low, agriculture tariff is already low. So ultimately the benefit has to go to these customers. So whatever power purchase optimization they do in terms of this RE, definitely it will go to the C&I customers only.
Any immediate responses, or I was hoping to?
We welcome these drop in prices. We are already buying in bulk, and we have already tied up with so many RE generators. So it has to be looked into holistically on the economics and viability of the whole setup. We see everybody is a customer to us, so we cannot do so much of segmentation. So what determines the things are what arrangements and what tariffs we have defined for various categories. Like in our case, we have again, as highlighted before, we have mostly small capacity consumers in BYPL area. So a lot of residential customers need to be supported. So tariff will have some cross subsidization, and we cannot suddenly transition. It has to be done gradually. But to control tariffs and to keep the prices low, we are happy to see the developments, and we are buying a lot of RE procurements as a bulk procurement. So that would automatically percolate to each and every customer. So that option is already there. So see, these specialized segmentation can be done in that of course would step in once we have parallel licenses and other things. But why I'm again and again repeating universal supply obligation is we have to see all the customers equally. So what matters is how the tariff has to be structured, what is the viability of getting collections, what is the cost of supply at various levels, at various categories, how many efforts DISCOMS have to make, what is the variability, how much we have to invest in maintaining the network, and what are the implications of sudden, moving out of customers. We'll have a lot of transmission and substation capacity, which can be stranded or something else can happen. So all these things happen slightly gradually, but we have to see holistically on the whole setup. So the benefit is automatically coming to customers in terms of reduced cost, input cost, and we are very happy to participate. At local levels also, en masse, we are promoting renewable energy. We regularly hold meetings with RWAs, with SMEs, with C&I customers, and we motivate them to go for. And we have been designated as nodal agency for RE implementation in respective states. So all DISCOMs are playing their part, but we have to look at the things holistically. So our attempt is to keep the prices lower, and we are already buying a lot of RE. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you to all my panelists. So in the interest of time, I'll now throw it open to both the audience present here as well as the audience online to see if there are any questions. So if I could request, when before your question, if you could introduce yourself, and then if it is directed to a particular panelist, please do mention that. And for folks online, I think you can drop it in the chat or in the Q&A box. So over to you. No questions? Anything online? I have one, but any other we can add on. But in the interim, so one of the questions to you, Mr. Sharma, is what is the percentage of SME or MSME consumers within BYPL's network? Would you have an approximate estimation of that?
We have close to 1.8 million customers. So SMEs are could be 3,000 or 4,000, very small number, not more. It's a purely residentially and commercial, small commercial dominated area. So not much concentration, but we have a couple of industrial pockets in Patparganj and other areas. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, this is Sachin from Council of Energy, Environment and Water. I have one small question. So let's say these rooftop solars or solars are being maintained, and multiple times, I mean, the developer as well as the DISCOM would be knowing that the maintenance of these systems can vary across the, depending upon how the consumers are. So now when we talk about the management, electricity and demand management, so how would a developer respond? Because let's say the consumers themselves are not aware to how to keep these systems maintained. Let's say if they do not have an AMC, so that particular portion of the energy supply would be a loss which has to be compensated by the grid, whether it's a daytime especially. So how that particular management will be coming into the picture, and how would that compensate?
So would it be addressed to anyone in particular, or Sashi and
I mean,
Sunil?
yeah, for the developer and DISCOM, yeah.
So basically you are saying in terms of DSM, demand side management.
Yeah.
If the consumer does not consume properly, then obviously the energy will get recorded in his meter and he has to pay for it. So I am not able to get as to how the developer comes into the picture in that case.
So basically what the maintenance is there, right? So let's say there is a fixed AMC of these particular systems. So if the consumer themselves are not aware to how to maintain these systems, can eventually lead to the degradation of these modules or soiling or whatever it is, which will affect the generation of these particular sites.
You are talking about solar rooftop, or you
Rooftops,
are talking?
yeah.
You are talking about rooftops.
Yeah.
Okay. So that AMC, definitely they have to take care of the asset themselves, and in case the AMC is not done properly, that definitely it will affect the efficiency of that rooftop itself, and the consumer won't get the benefit, the proper benefit that they should derive out of it.
Yeah, and similarly on the DISCOM side, sir, is there a way to evaluate that or know that pre-handed key how the systems are going to?
We are already doing a detailed study with you. The Bhavna is there in your team. So are you part of this study? So you know already we have done 60 site visits together.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of issues are there, and with regard to excess and soiling.
Issues are already there, but...
So we are waiting for the final report from your side.
Yeah. But so from my side, actually, the question is, is
please.
there a way to know beforehand? Because there's a lot of consumers, so there's a lot of problems which is already there. So is there a way to know how could that be addressed? So let's say AMC is one of the part, but is there another way?
Yes, now we have started with the key insights. Some insights came from interactions with you. Now we have started analyzing generation month-wise. If there's a decline, we are trying to send alerts to customers so that if in case there is some issue. Also, we have plans to enter into, because that is a pain area for customers, we may have to enter into this space to give them a permanent solution. Thank you.
Any other questions? If online, can we have a quick check? Nothing. So if not, then thank you very much for your time and insights. I know we are a little over time, so I'll hand it over to Bharat for the closing remarks. One more, okay.
How developers can play a role, especially the RESCO model scaling for small ticket size?
Yeah, definitely the developer can play a role in that, but there are certain challenges to it as well. That suppose if we go in a captive model or we install some group captive kind of scheme, wherein you say 10, 20 customers, maybe 20 MSME customers come forward and they contribute some amount. But there was a recent Haryana case which I was studying, wherein 26% equity was infused by these customers and 74% by the developer. And it was a SPV kind of thing. And but ultimately the DISCOM government came into the picture and they basically restricted the 26% energy which has been used. Now there comes a consumption criteria as well in terms of that entire energy has to be used by the customers only. So in case the customers are using the entire energy, then of course that has to be funded by the customers only. So that becomes one issue, that when it comes to the implementation part, there are basically certain challenges in terms of DISCOMS willingness as to how to implement it. So there are regulatory loopholes wherein the DISCOM get the advantage and the customers are not able to drive the entire benefit out of it.
Thank you.
So thank you all for a really useful. I think it was also very well set up because we have the key stakeholders that need to be, eventually are going to be able to see this entire, this piece of the transition forward. And I'm really grateful we had both the utility and the regulator with the developer and Basundhara, who's been part of this study. Very, very important to have sort of this collective approach to solving these sets of problems, because like I said earlier, this is uncharted areas and we're all discovering as we're going. So with that, let me just try and do a sort of summary, if I can, of 3 or 4 key points that came up. I'm not going to repeat what we just heard from the panelists, but clearly one of the tasks that continue to remain before us is to present CNI customers, of course, to begin with, but eventually we want to make sure that this is something that is available for all consumers, whoever, on a voluntary basis. But to begin with CNI customers with innovative products and mechanisms. And the reason we're starting with CNI consumers is, of course, as we know, they are the ones who have this greatest, the threat of sales migration is the biggest. So you want to be able to retain them. But eventually we want to be able to offer these innovative products and mechanisms that allow them to continue their journey and be part of India's journey towards renewable energy, and that we are going to have to think up various new options and opportunities that are out there, from green tariffs to AI-enabled smart metering, the virtual net metering and gross net metering and peer-to-peer blockchain and trading. I mean, just there's so many different things that different people are trying out. And as we heard Mr. Prasad say, how India is perhaps already ahead of some of the other countries in terms of the GDAM and term ahead and so on markets. So that's one thing, the need for us to continue to look for new and innovative products and mechanisms. The second, I think, is sort of slightly more subtle, and that is how can we align the interests of the different stakeholders, because these, each of you is a sort of key stakeholder, key actor in this space, and it's very important for us to be able to align the interests, because only then will we be able to move forward with solutions. Otherwise, as we've seen repeatedly, it's one step forward, 2 steps back, something else comes out, and eventually what happens is it leads to the conclusion that this is regulatory uncertainty, or this is policy uncertainty, lack of cohesiveness, and so on. So I think this next task before us is how do we align the interests of the stakeholders. And part of that is, while I think, and I'm very glad that several of you brought it up, that we don't only talk about renewable energy and supply options, but also look at the entire space that's out there around demand response and demand shifting and so on. But for consumers, for the utility and the regulator to really come together and have those interests aligned, I think that's the sort of second message I'm sort of picking up from today. Third, of course, is finance. And again, when we talk about large CNI consumers, finance was not really a big issue. That's why we all started there. But if we have to move away from just large, the 50 large corporates that will anyway do it, we have to go beyond them and go to MSMEs and so on, then we are going to have to tackle this finance. And that's why, again, you know, the conversations today around what can the utility take on and sort of avoid the need for capex at the level of individual companies and so on comes up. And we've seen this, you know, we've done studies ourselves on the challenges with just commercial lending as it is today. It's not an option that many customers can sort of look to. So to think, and this is, you know, and again, it's part of the alignment of stakeholders, but finance and really thinking about innovative finance will be a third part. And fourth is, you know, and I'm really glad we were able to get you know, the regulator from the US join us, though it was, I think, close to midnight her time. You know, just to underscore the importance of how we're all in this together. I mean, there is no particular advantage any country has today. We're all learning, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to learn from each other and transfer knowledge from India to other countries, because I don't think we should see this as a one-way street, really. I mean, we have lots of experience. As I often say, you know, Indian states are sort of larger than countries, and each of our states has so much experience to share. So I think the other sort of, I think, next step, Deepak, would be for us to see how we can also share some of the current learnings in India with others who are dealing with or might be 3 or 4 steps behind us. And it's very, I'm very happy that many of us are gathered here today, and I'd like to sort of, I hope that we continue to sort of collaborate as we take the next steps in this transition to a sort of sustainable future for all. So those were my sort of key takeaways from today, and with that, let me just say thank you to all the panelists, to all of you for staying, and I think now there's lunch being served at the back, and I'd request you to stay and join us for lunch. Thank you.